Foodscaping Utah, and we are excited to welcome you to our grapevine pruning and demonstration class here. One thing about grapevines is people are always a little bit intimidated to prune their grapevines, and we always get a lot of questions about it. So we thought we would do a live class so that not only we could show you on some of our grapevines, but then also answer questions that people might have when they're pruning. One thing about pruning grapevines is, for sure, the number one tip is that you should do it. Even if you prune not totally perfectly, it's better than not pruning at all. So John's I'm going to flip it around so that John can start giving you some information on what we're looking at and what we're going to do.
So if you're there, let us know you're there. Good morning. Grapes are fun because you really get to take off a ton and it's intimidating and it sounds crazy, but just like Holly was saying, we're talking 90% at least, maybe even more. We'll talk about support for just a minute, but then the next thing that I think is super important is to understand how the vine grows and where it produces fruit. That really helps. Otherwise, you just look at this and you're like, I have no idea what to do, right? But if you know how grapes grow and where the fruit is, that can really help. Well, first of all, the trellis, these are just 4x4 redwood posts. We have a video where we built this trellis that you can check out if you haven't seen it. And we definitely recommend getting them up on a support so that you can prune them, because for that, we'll transition to kind of how grapes grow, right? So one thing, and we got some vocabulary. So hopefully this isn't too much terminology, but you can see
it makes it easier to understand what you're doing.
It makes it easier to understand, and then you can kind of know what things are and what you're doing. But terms we'll go over, we're going to talk about the trunk, and then what are called spurs, cordons, and canes. Those are kind of the main terms for grapes. But you can see the trunk in the middle there is obviously the oldest wood. Okay, and this vine's actually not that old. I think this is its 4th year, right? Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
You want me to come over?
Yeah.
Okay, so these are canes. Okay, and here's a nice cane. Can you see that one? Okay.
Yep.
These are canes. Okay, so canes were new growth last year. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's last year's growth. And then if you can see, this one's going to be a little harder to see, but this is a spur. It's not a very old one. And then down here we have another spur. Okay, it's
so you can tell the difference because the wood is a darker color, right?
Right, the wood's a darker color.
They're thicker.
And they're thicker, and they have canes coming out of them. Okay, if it was 3 or 4 years older, you might have like 1, 2, 3, 4 years older of growth. Remember, you have to talk into this side, right? Yeah. But so the idea then, this is where the fruit is going to be. Like the reason we want to know what a cane is because we need the canes to produce the fruit for this coming season. Does that make sense? So the way grapevines work is this wood here will put out shoots. You know, a nice cane is the one that's got a good color and is usually about pencil thickness. Okay, but you know, it's never ideal. So you kind of have to work with it. I mean, look at this thing. Like, it's going to be a little bit of a chore, but we'll work with it and we'll try to find what works. But with this cane, for example, what'll happen is the leaves will emerge in maybe about a month. You can prune earlier, but this is looking really good to prune now. The leaves will emerge, and with it will come fruit. So flowers first. It's a little tiny flower. You can't even tell it's a flower. But then the grapes will emerge. But that's only going to happen on the cane or the last year's wood. It's always fruiting from new buds from last year's wood. Does that make sense?
So if you don't want to cut off everything that grew last year.
Right. You don't, yeah, exactly. You don't want to cut off everything that grew last year. Like if we cut it all the way back to the trunk, the vine would be fine. It would shoot out new spurs, or excuse me, new shoots, and then it would fruit the year after that, right? So that, you might have to be in that situation if you got a huge mess. But the fact that it's always on last year's growth means that if we don't prune it back to the trunk every year, like I don't want to leave anything way out here, right?
Right.
Because the fruit is going to come from down there. So if you've got an old neglected vine, your fruit is always kind of going further and further away from where you want it to be, right? So that's why pruning is huge, and it's a ton of growth. And we're gonna try. We'll probably cut 90% off of this one. This one's really vigorous. Do you think we should? Let's maybe walk over to the other vine real quick. With this variety, this is what's called a spur pruned variety. Okay, I've been talking about canes, and that's really important to know. But there's going to be two different types of pruning. One is called spur pruning, and one is called cane pruning. So let's talk about spur pruning on this vine, because this is a variety that does a little better pruned with spur pruning. Okay, so the other one is a cane pruning vine, and we'll do that one for cane pruning. If you have no clue, it would be better to start with cane pruning. But if somebody has specific questions, we can answer those later. For now, let's look at a spur pruning. If you know the variety, you can look up which it does better with. And it's not that you won't get grapes. It's just that some of them tend to do better and produce more grapes with spur pruning, and some do better with cane pruning. Spur pruning is kind of easy because you can kind of work towards getting permanent cordons and spurs. So we didn't talk about cordons yet. So a cordon is actually, can we go over to the arbor real quick?
Yeah.
That's the best place to see a cordon. So a cordon is like a trunk, but it's lateral coming off of a trunk. So this will be good to look at the arbor real quick, because it'll give you an idea of what your long term is going to look like. This vine's much older. This one's 7, 8 years, going into its 8th season, I think. So it's got a big trunk coming out. Look at the size of the trunk on the other one over there. And grapes will live like forever. They're amazing. Some are like centuries old, right? But the trunk comes up, and then it's split here, and you see this big thing that looks like a trunk. This is called a cordon. And this one's got some dead wood on it. So like the first thing I'll do, and this is the first thing you do anytime you prune, is cut all the dead wood off, and then you'll know what you're working with. So a cordon is going to stay there for years. That's what makes it different than a cane or a spur. Okay?
You need a new cane
And then from the cordon, you'll have spurs, which are these gnarly guys. Okay? And with spur pruning, what we can do is and look at some diagrams, I'll show you in a minute, but what we'll do is prune back to spurs on the cordon every year. So what we're going to do then is prune to form cordons, okay? Because if this was older, we'd already have cordons on it, and we could do the spur pruning. But instead of doing that, we're going to use either this one. I'm going to look at the vine, and I'm going to say what's going to be my permanent cordon, which is, think of it like as a lateral or like a lateral trunk, basically, but that we're going to have on this wire. Then train your cordon to it, and then prune back to that every year. Healthy wood there. This is where it gets a little less healthy, right? So I am going to prune right back to that, and I'll tie that on later.
So he's just cutting away.
Just cutting away. This one won't be as impressive as the other one. Okay, so actually I'll leave that for just a second so I can talk about spur pruning. Okay. Maybe we will actually leave it. So say this was an older cordon, one that looked like that arbor over there. Okay, we got a little Utah weather going on, right? A little bit of snow maybe. What you do to start your spur is you would count one, either 2 or 3. Some people actually go 4, kind of depends on the vine, but I wouldn't worry about it. We usually just do 2 buds per spur, okay? And then you prune it back to that. So we just made a spur, right? And then it'll shoot out new growth here, okay? And then next year, next March, we can prune back to the spur here. Okay, so this is making a spur. So say you had a cord on here. This is a spur, and I would prune back to that.
So that's the final product here.
Right. And if you counted all these buds, I think I think if you counted all the buds, I think you'd get close to 90%, don't you?
Pretty close.
There's not a lot of buds left on that thing. Okay. So here's the monster.
And if you missed this one, it's called a Frontenac grapevine. It's very vigorous and cold hardy. It grows like crazy, but the grapes are seeded, so we use them for juice and jelly. They're not necessarily what I would consider my favorite fresh eating grape.
The goal now is here we have 2 wires. So what we want to end up with is 4 canes coming from the trunk. So 1 on this wire going this way, 1 on this wire going this way, and go in the other directions. To give you an idea of what the final product is, we want about the rule of thumb is about 40 buds, 30 to 40 buds, depending on your of cane, right? Of fruiting wood. So if you're cane pruning this and we have 4, then you could have 10 on each one. But I think we're going to leave maybe 60 on this one because it's such a vigorous vine. Does that make sense? So I'll have maybe 10 going this way and maybe 20 going that way on the top wire and the same on the bottom wire. Okay. So the first thing we were going to do is get ourselves some room. So I'm going to take this loppers you got to get sometimes for pruner.
So you know for sure you don't want to keep that because it's too close to the ground.
So yeah, this is too close to the ground, and it's going to be hard to get any of those canes up onto the wire. And here, if you notice, I've got 2 canes that I'm going to prune to this wire. Okay. So we're going to take this whole thing out, and we're cutting off a lot there, so the vine is going to think, oh geez, now I got to really grow a lot, right? So if I pull that out, that's going to clean it up quite a bit. Okay, so let's see, what do we got here? Yeah, if you can get in there, that's really good. So what we have, this is last year's growth, right? This is last year's growth. And then can you see right here? This is the year before growth, right? So this was, 2019 growth. This is 2020 and it's 2021 now. All right. So this is 2-year-old and this is last year. Okay. So this is what last year when I pruned, this was a renewal spur. So it's a little spur that we wanted this cane to grow out of last year because we know it's going to produce fruit on all of this wood. And then look at it, it's nicely positioned. Well, if it was here, that would be cool. But it's close enough to this wire where we put it on the wire. So what we're going to do is keep 10 buds of this cane. We're going to tie it to this wire, okay? And then this one, I'm going to prune back to maybe 2 buds. Gosh, you could leave 3, but what we'll do is we're going to prune it back to that to have a renewal spur that'll produce the cane during this growing season. This renewal spur will produce growth. It'll have new shoots like this one, right? That then next year we can pick a cane from that to put on here. So, what did I say? I said we're going to keep this one?
You did.
Okay, so let's count. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We could go maybe 11. Like I said, this is really super vigorous. And this is actually kind of thick for a cane. You know, I said pencil thickness, this is a little too thick, but you could maybe, you know, I mean, you got to kind of work with what you got, right? So let's cut it. Oh, I did put a twisty tie where I wanted to cut it. That's handy, right? Let's cut it here, okay? And then we're gonna just start cutting all this other stuff off.
So once you've picked your cane,
Right.
that's the cane you're keeping. And you trim everything else off. Aaron's grape is a himrod.
Himrod, that's a cane variety. We've got one on the arbor right over there. Yeah,
We love
yeah.
himrod.
It's a cane variety. So what we're doing right now is how you would train it. So and then I said we were going to use this as a renewal spur, right?
Right.
Okay.
So
we
for
got
every cane you make, you need to also make a renewal spur.
yeah. Some people would do so. Here's our cane, and then we're going to do a renewal spur. And if this had, you know, another shoot off of here last year, you could use a renewal spur right here too. Doesn't necessarily have to be back to the trunk. Usually they aren't actually, but you can see a renewal spur here. This is one that I made last year. Let's see, and then there's some renewal spurs up here too. But what I was gonna say is, I think you're usually fine with 4 renewal spurs, but a lot of people would leave 2 renewal spurs per where the canes are going to be. Does that make sense? So up to 8.
Okay. In case one dies or breaks off or something.
Right, kind of an insurance policy. And we did have some dieback, you know, so this is going to be my spur. Okay, so I cut it right there. I've got a clip on it here. This will look a little better. I know I don't want these, so I'll just clean this up a little bit for you guys. But
so just to kind of recap, if you were coming out here thinking about how am I going to prune this thing, you might start with things that are low or coming out of the ground like that.
Or dead.
Or dead. And then you're going to focus on picking 4 canes to keep, and close to those 4 places to make renewal spurs. Ideally, you want your canes to be somewhere near your wires, because that's where you're putting your canes.
Right.
Right? You're training them along your wires. So if you can find canes, again, the canes are last year's growth. It's a lot of terms and information.
It
But
is.
that's why kind of at the beginning when I said even if you don't do it well, you should still prune your grapevine.
Right.
It doesn't have to be perfect, and pruning poorly is better than not pruning at all. So, and you get used to it as you're going, you learn how to do it.
Yeah, and you know, if you mess it up, don't worry about it. You can't really mess it up. I think if you know,
You can mess it up, but it won't kill your vine probably.
right? No, the pruning is not going to kill it, right? Like you might cut off all the fruiting wood by accident, but that's why we were stressing this is fruiting wood. And I cut this one off, so that was not going to produce
But
fruit.
you're going to cut off some of the fruiting wood.
You're going to cut off 90%, right? 90%. So don't leave more than that, because what happens, I mean, the reason you do that is because you want good fruit, and you don't want your vine to get bigger and bigger and further from your trellis. So it's keeping it managed. But the reason I was talking to him so much about how many buds to leave is because you don't want there to the vine to try to put too much. If it has too much fruit, it won't have enough energy to make good quality fruit. So you'll end up with smaller berries, usually grapes, and they might not be as sweet. So let's go over picking a cane again for this one, because we're on the next one.
Okay.
If you guys have questions while we're going, type them in. Holly will take note while I'm doing this. So this is kind of a spur, this gnarly section from last year. What's that? Okay. And then I put this twisty tie just because I came out and picked this one. But this is pretty thick again. Another option would be this one, but it looked like it was weak and not very healthy back here. So we're gonna go with this, okay? And this actually looks like good wood here. Do you see this? So we're gonna try to get this. Yeah, I think I like that. So here, can you see what, it's hard to see, I know. But you got this option for a cane and this option for a cane.
Okay.
And they both came out of this same shoot. That's why this one's so thick. But I could either try to take this up and tie it on, or I could tie this on. And this one looks easier, doesn't it?
It does.
But, so what I'm gonna do then is get this other stuff out of the way, okay?
Because you know you don't want to keep it because you've already picked the one.
Right, and I've picked, let's see, this to be a renewal spur. And I think we'll use this as a renewal spur too. Right, that's the only thing that you kind of have to keep in mind. Once it's not only canes, you do need a few little stubs back here to grow your canes for next year. I do know that I don't want any of this old wood, old thicker wood, right? And actually, when I pull this out, it'll be easier to see, I think.
Right.
That's the thing, it starts as a mess, and then we're gonna keep going. And that's why it's kind of nice, you know, we have a grape pruning video, but you really don't see as much, you know? Like that's kind of nice where it's nice to do a little bit longer class, because then we can go through all the way through the pruning. And hopefully we'll even be able to get to a point where it looks nice. So I'm gonna keep this as a spur, renewal spur. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. So I'm gonna take this one out. Okay. So now I've got 2 buds here, and I can do 2 buds here too.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
An insurance one.
So now I have an insurance one. I've got 1 renewal spur here, and this is really 2 renewal spurs here. And you know, after we just find all of our other renewal wood, we might decide to cut one of those off. We'll see. You kind of, it's about balance, and there's really not a lot of wrong decisions. It's kind of, as long as you have a plan for next year's wood, and you've got your vine, you know, back on the trellis. Okay, so this is all cut off too. Wow. It's tied on, huh? That's the problem.
So, as you can see, I don't know if we can get it again. That side that he's working on, the kind of left side there, is looking a lot more manageable.
It's getting there, right? This out of the way. All right, here we are. No, we don't want this one either, right? Get this thing out of here. Okay, so here we are. We're down to our last 2 kind of cane options, right? We got this big, huge, gnarly guy, and we got this one. So, I don't know.
I like the one on the bottom.
You like the one on the bottom?
You like the one on the top?
Well, I was looking at the color and the thickness of it, and the fact that I could really easily just kind of
pop it on the top.
put it on here.
All right.
But, you know, honestly, either one's fine. See, this one would come up too, especially when we cut some of this.
No, you're right. I think the top one.
Just because it's easier to get up there, right? Yeah. Either one of those is going to be good, I think. Are they going to be perfect? You know, who knows? We'll get a ton of grapes. That's the thing about these things. You know, they really, when they're a healthy vine, they produce a ton of grapes all at once. So that's why we like to make raisins, we make juice, jelly, and we eat them fresh, you know.
So if we don't eat these fresh, we juice all of these.
You know, the seed isn't very palatable for some people, right? Maybe that's a personal preference, though. All right, so I did have some of that tied, didn't I? This is an old one, but it'll probably work. So the idea then is we got our cane. We're gonna tie it in. Hemrod, is fairly vigorous too. Not like this monster, but but it's more vigorous than Reliance. So we do it cane pruned on the arbor, which can be a little harder than doing it like this. But the reason I mention vigor again is if this was a variety like that Cannabis where you don't or it's not very vigorous, you wouldn't want to go up to 60 or 80 buds. But what we'll do here now then is kind of count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This is where can you see this wood here? This is where it's not, quite as healthy. This isn't going to produce as good a fruit. Does that make sense? So,
kind of a lighter color.
Yeah, I should really tie that in a little tighter. I might have to redo it later, but with some good twist.
Your hands aren't so cold.
Yeah. We're like, oh, it's going to be a beautiful day on Saturday. Yeah, well, that changed in a hurry, didn't it? So this might slip out, but I'll leave it like that just so you have an idea. So I'll cut this all the way off, but just so you can see it. This I wouldn't want to leave this, but that's just so that it'll stay on the tie. I'll retie it when my hands aren't cold. But so here we got a cane and here we got a cane. So we're halfway done with this vine, right?
And then we have our spur.
And we've got a renewal spur here and a renewal spur here. We actually have two here. Right?
Two here and one there.
Yeah.
So, and the big difference, in case people kind of just came in, the cane is 2 years old, right?
The cane is last year, so it's 1 year. Yeah.
Right. But the spur, you're making your cane for next year.
Yeah, especially you can have spurs that are, older wood. But the point is the spur isn't the cane. It isn't last year. So I'm going to start pruning on these.
Okay, let's see if there's I think there's a question. Let's see. So for cane prune variety, keep at least 4 canes, 10 buds each, and make at least 2 spurs. So for spurs, you're going to want to make at least 4.
For the whole vine, 4 to 8, I would say.
Because
more than 8's overkill, but 4 to 8.
For each of your canes, you want a spur to replace it next year. So if you have a 4-wire system, or I guess a 2-wire system, but you have one on each side, you're going to want 4 canes and at least 4 spurs.
Right, good.
1 spur for each cane, and then a lot of people recommend having an insurance spur also, so up to 8.
This one's going to be too hard.
Hopefully that makes sense.
All right, so I think we're going to use, this is another cane. Could use this as a cane. This whole vine, we're going to try to kind of prop it this way. Like they will break, but if it's healthy, it won't be super brittle. Like these canes, if you they can break. But anyway, the reason I mentioned that is I'm going to try to prop it up a little bit, to get it back going that way. We do have a lot of space this way, so it's really not a big deal. But if you wanted, this is only 7-foot spacing. That's the other thing that you might want to consider. In like vineyard settings for wine production, a lot of times they're really pretty close and tight, like 6 feet. But in a home setting, especially for table grapes, if you love the variety and you want a lot, it's okay to have more space depending on how vigorous it is. This one's super vigorous, so I'm going to kind of let the cane go past my post here.
Right. As far as varieties go, this one is the Frontenac. It is our juicing grape. We also have Himrod, which is a green table grape that we absolutely love. We have...
Makes awesome raisins.
Makes great raisins also. We have Red Reliance, is also really good. It's got kind of a unique flavor that a lot of people really like.
It's like a little more foxy, right?
I don't really know what foxy tastes like.
It tastes like Red Reliance grape.
But it's, we really like it too, and they're very pretty. And then we have the Cannabis that we showed earlier. We haven't had any grapes off of it yet, so we can't really speak to that. And then we have a Jupiter. and that one comes really highly recommended from USU. And again, that one's too young. We'll get our first grapes off of it this year, so we'll let you know. But those are all grape varieties that will do well in Utah, and that we would recommend.
Like the #1 planted vine in Utah is probably Concord. So here's our cane. And as you can see, you know, this one could be growing all the way to Idaho if we let it.
We're not going to.
We're not going to, and in fact, I'm not going to leave any of this out here, but I want to get it up on the vine here, or on the wire for you. Okay, so, yeah, that tie totally didn't work over here, right? But you can see now we've got 1, 2, 3 canes, right? And this one's too long, for sure. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Let's maybe go way out here.
So normally the rule of thumb is 10.
Right, 40 total, 30 to 40 total. On our Spur prune Reliance, we go 30. If you find it, you might even be able to find for your particular variety recommendations for how many buds to leave for next year, or excuse me, for the fruiting wood. Okay.
So, you got something?
Go ahead. No.
I was just gonna say, for things that you're gonna need for pruning grapes, you want to definitely invest in a nice pair of pruning shears. I really like these Felco ones. Corona makes good pruners. You want to, if you get kind of the cheaper ones, you might have to replace them every year. The other thing that's really handy to have is that nursery tape, and John sure wishes he had some right now. But I'll show you what it is. It's kind of basically stretchy. It's not actually tape, like it doesn't stick to anything. It's just kind of stretchy, rubbery material. It comes in a roll, just like you'd see like electrical tape. And it's really handy to just have and tie things on as you go. There's also clips you can use to do that. Sometimes John will do that while he's mid-pruning and then come back and retie it with nursery tape.
Right. Okay, so let's do the last cane here. We've got, this is the one that we kind of picked before we started the video, but you know, we could change our minds. We could use this cane, or we could use this cane. You know, either one of those. This one, you know, it didn't turn out good. Like, it started out good. Well, this one you could maybe kind of make into it. Like, you really have options. That's what's great. They put out so much growth that you know, you can't really go wrong. I think we will go with this one. Then what we could do maybe is use this one, since it's a nice healthy, wow, maybe that should be our fruiting wood actually. Look at this. This is a nice length already. We could tie this up on the wire. Or in order to have a renewal spur back close to the trunk, we can prune it here as a renewal spur. It's a little low though, so the problem with that is we would ideally want to make sure it comes up some, like we could tie it in or prop it up somehow.
This one right here, not a good one.
Which one?
That one right here.
This?
Yeah. That one doesn't look very healthy, maybe?
You know, I think it's probably fine. Yeah, let's use that as the renewal. The problem with it is it's kind of facing the wrong way, but this shoot, when it comes out, we can just kind of push it back over.
So
hopefully.
That is a good example to talk about, because that was a spur, right?
Yeah,
so
this was my renewal spur last year.
But he's just going to reuse it again for next year.
Yeah, and for now, we'll pretend that we're going to make that a spur too. And then when we're all done with the canes, we can kind of come back in and decide, look at the spur situation, you know, like make sure you have the right amount. So we decided we want this one as our cane, right?
Sure.
Just in case, we'll leave that, and then we're going to take this out. This might be thick enough for loppers. Let's see. You're okay. I'm going to take all of this out.
Ooh. It's looking dramatically different from when we started.
Yeah.
Should have taken a picture.
Oh man, we always do. We're usually good at that. Well, we got it in the video. I almost messed up there. I think it's going to be perfect. But I cut this kind of without counting the buds. It's about where this one was. But this is our cane, right? Dare we try to put it on the other side of the post?
I don't know.
Probably not. Okay. So, there you go, right?
All right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
Plenty.
It's plenty. So
You
now though you can see we've got 4 canes,
okay,
right?
So let's point at them.
We got 1 cane here, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. And since we have extra trellis and a really vigorous vine, we're leaving these. What I'll do later, not during the class, is I'll try to pull this up a little, strap it in here maybe, tie it in here, and then tie this on.
Okay, and then we show all the spurs.
Okay, so we've got a renewal spur here, 1, got a renewal spur here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm right now deciding I don't need this one.
Okay.
Because it's, the further this goes this way, year after year, I mean, these things can last 100 years, right? We probably won't, last that long, but you want to try to keep your spurs, and that's why I like having this one too. If you get some new growth, it's nice to keep it close to the trunk, okay? So just to show loppers, so we got Felco pruners and Corona loppers, but so I think we're pretty much done, right?
Yeah. We got a question.
With this vine.
Yeah.
I counted that renewal one too, right? Yeah. I think it looks really good. I'm excited.
right.
I mean, I don't know, we should put it all in a pile. What we'll do is we'll put it in a pile and take a picture.
All right. We got a question, John?
Yeah.
Okay, so you might have to. Sorry. So last year, when I cut the canes were dripping or weeping, did I shock it? Is this water coming out, and is it normal?
Totally normal. That's a great question. So these vines, they might start even now because it's getting close to breaking dormancy, but it's sap, right? And at the wounds you'll get drippage, and we get a lot of drippage, so it's totally normal. Don't worry about it. It used to be thought, like the I don't know if that makes sense, but people used to always want to prune grapes in like January to try to prevent that, but recent research shows that it actually doesn't negatively affect the vine at all, the sap. So don't even worry about it.
Okay, perfect. And now is a great time to prune your grapes.
Now's a great time to prune your grapes. I'd get at it in northern Utah. It's probably late if you're in, Southern California or something like that. They might have already broken dormancy, but grapes, we do most of the pruning when they're dormant. If this grows some of it in the wrong way or like grows into the grass, or we'll cut those out, right? Too, but you can do some pruning during the season. There's no reason you can't. So like if something's growing the wrong way and it's not where you like it, you can prune it. But we do almost all the pruning when they're dormant.
Cool. If you guys have questions, let us know. But I think we're about ready to wrap it up.
Okay, cool.
Do you have any last words of wisdom?
I think grape pruning is fun. So my main my main words of wisdom are have fun with it, and don't get too stressed out about it, because they're going to grow back.
And do it.
And don't be afraid to prune them. Prune, a ton of it off, and it'll be a healthier vine for it. Okay. I think that's it. All right.
Check that we don't have any.
We're checking to see if we have questions real quick.
See any.
All right. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching Foodscaping Utah. Grow your own.